Good evening, everybody. I see we've got a few people logging in. Glad to be with us tonight. We'll be in Ecclesiastes, chapters 5 through 8 tonight. So please let me know who's here. Get settled in if you want to open your Bibles to chapter 5. Hopefully you have your worksheets nearby as well. Lots to talk about tonight, and looking forward to hearing all your feedback. As always, we got to give it some time here to let people find us and get situated. If you're not hearing me, let me know. What do we have out there tonight? Hi, Judy. Good evening and welcome. Glad you're here tonight. Glad you're all with us tonight. Tom is back. Hey, Tom. Good evening and welcome. About 2 more minutes here before we start. Scott, good evening to you also. Good group checking in here. It's good to see. Hi, Melissa. Good evening. Glad you're out there as well. We'll be in Ecclesiastes chapter 5 once we get started. So be ready, and we'll give it about 1 more minute, I think. Maybe 2. Just like I heard good feedback after last week. It sounds like the microphone was a good upgrade. Please continue to give us feedback, good or bad, if that can help the class here. We're creeping up towards 20. That means it's just about time to start. I agree, Tom. Lots of good stuff in these chapters. Having a lot of fun with Ecclesiastes. Hope you guys are too. Unfortunately, it's only going to take us 1 more night after tonight. It goes quick. These shorter books go quickly. Laura, good evening. And Jane, I don't, but you got my mouth watering already. I had a pretty light dinner to get over here before catechism, so I can imagine it. I can imagine it cooking. Hi, Rachel. Welcome from, how's Arizona? Nice and warm, I'm sure. Pastor Kirshner is here. Marge is here. Good evening to both of you, and welcome. Glad you're with us. And I'll wave back, Marge. All right, let's see. Probably time to start, I think. Looks like most of our group is here, and then people can always join in as we get going. All right, so we're gonna pray and get going. Dear Lord, Heavenly Father, as we continue to study Ecclesiastes, help us to rejoice and to thank you, because without you, life truly is meaningless. We're so glad to have you in our lives. Help us to find some wisdom and perspective tonight and some applications for our own faith. We ask that you bless our study. In Jesus' name, amen. Rachel says it's warm in Arizona. Yeah, it was in the 30s today, so I'm sure you had much better than that. Joe and Marlene are here. Levon is here. Good evening to all of you. We are going to pick it up in Ecclesiastes chapter 5. So just really quickly, again, Solomon toward the end of his life, chatted with somebody today, read somewhere that they guessed he was 60 when he wrote this. No way to know for sure. I would guess at least that, if not even older than that. And remember, his goal here is to try to help us think about what life without God is like, and then, of course, to rejoice that we have God in our lives. All right, so chapter 5 gets underway, and the first question says, in verses 1 through 6, what points does Solomon make about our relationship with God? I know it's a wide open question, but I think there's a lot he says here. So maybe just pick one of the things that struck you from verses 1 to 6 and throw it out here for discussion. And I realize we could get a bunch of different things right off the bat, but let's just go and see what we get. So Tom says, do not make idle promises to God. Yeah, I think that's a good one. Verse 1 says, guard your steps when you go to the house of God. We ought to be thinking about our worship and approaching it in the right mindset. And I think Judy's comment there too plays into that, standing in awe of God. This is important stuff, right? And we don't want to just do it on a whim. Melissa says, think carefully about what we say and how we approach him. Verses 4 and 5 talk about the vows. I mean, let's mean it, right? Let's be serious in how we approach our God in worship. We don't want to do things without thinking or get into something and not realize what it is that we're committing to. I like Rachel's comment there as well. She says, let God be the leader of the relationship. We aren't the leader, right? We are certainly, so there's some humility here too before him. Marge says, listening is better than speaking. Yeah. I really like verse 2, this, especially the second half. I wrote this down on a Post-it note for myself. God is in heaven and you are on earth. So let your words be few, right? There's so much we don't know. Let's let God be God. And let's just maybe be careful lest we maybe say something we regret. Amy talks about being, don't let your mouth lead you into sin. And yeah, that another connection there you make with that other quote. Pam talks about listening. Jane talks about a lot of words. You were all hitting on it here, right? Joyce says 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, right? God wants us to listen first, speak second, especially when he's involved. And you're all picking up on that in different ways. And I like how you're all maybe phrasing it in different ways too. God speaks, we listen, right? Certainly there are ways for us to respond, but first and foremost, we want to listen to God and let God be God. And Joanne says, we all love a good listener. Yeah, and that's hard to find, isn't it? If you find one, rejoice in that and stick with that person, because I don't know if you find it or not, but everybody's quick to, all of us quick to speak, as I think Amy says there. We need to flip that around. Tom says, would Philippians 4:8 fit here? And I'm just going to read that for the group. Philippians 4:8 says, finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right and pure and lovely, whatever is admirable or praiseworthy, think about such things. Yeah, I think so, Tom. I think that puts us in the right mindset for worship and approaching God. I sure think that would fit pretty well. Thank you, Joanne. That's kind of you to say. Judy, I like that comment as well. It takes us 2 years to learn to talk and a lifetime to learn when to be quiet. There's a lot of truth there to that as well. So really good stuff. I think you're all, again, in your own way here, grasping the point. I think we said all of this, but just maybe a couple of quick comments. Don't make any quick promises. I think we tend to do that if we get in a bind and we throw out a promise to God if he just does something. God discourages that here, right? Let's not make a quick promise or a vow that we can't deliver on. Let's not presume to tell him what to do or to assume that we know what he's doing or why he's doing it. Let's not presume anything here. He's so far above us. And this just the wide gulf between his knowledge and ours. We forget that sometimes. And I think Ecclesiastes does a nice job here of reminding us there's a tremendous gap between what we know and what God knows. Which is a good thing, right? You would want your God to know vastly more than you do. And you don't want to be able to figure out everything about your God. That doesn't speak very well of your God then. All right, really good discussion there. Let's go to number 2. It says, wealth is meaningless and a source of difficulty for those who have it. And then it says, list the reasons why. So as you look at verses 10 through 17, he talks about how wealth is meaningless. What are some of the reasons that he gives there for that statement? Why is wealth a source of difficulty for those who have it? And by the way, compared to the rest of the world, we all have it. The average American is like I think it's like the top 5% in the world. So to some degree, this is all of us. So Rachel says it never satisfied, right? It's fleeting. It doesn't go with you after you die. And yeah, enough is never enough, as Joyce says here. Scott says always wanting more. I think it was Rockefeller as he was nearing the end, as he was about to die, someone asked, how much is enough? And I think he said just a little bit more. I think our president, before he was president years ago, as a businessman, he said, you can never be too greedy, right? That's the world, right? We always want more. It's never enough. And boy, a lot of good stuff here too. Laura says, yeah, you could gain the whole world and lose your soul. Yep, another good reference there. I like how you guys are connecting New Testament verses. Never enough, Pastor and Tom say never enough. We worry about losing what we have. Marge says it can be an obsession and an addiction. And I think just a thought there too. Do we obsess about the number and if it's enough or not enough? And the more we do that, the less we trust in God. And I think that's a temptation, no matter how much we have as individuals. I'm sure some of us have more, some of us has less, but I'm going to guess all of us struggle with asking God to take care of us, no matter how much we have. My life, or my married life, which is almost 20 years, certainly there's ups and downs in there, and it can be just as hard to trust when there's more as it can be when there's less, and that's a challenge. Jane says we lose sleep worrying about it. Tom says hoarding comes into play here too. All kinds of issues that he talks about. And just the words that he uses here in verse 10, never enough, never satisfied. And verse 11, what benefit are they to the owner except to feast his eyes on them? It doesn't really satisfy, right? You don't find fulfillment in these things. And that's a good point there too, Ron and Joan, that the more we have, the more time and attention we need to manage it. Some have said over the years in one way or another, more money, more problems. There's truth to that too. And there's not always joy in that either. Very good. Maybe some other points too. It can be suddenly won or suddenly lost, easily gained, easily lost. It can be hard to achieve, troublesome to achieve or to gain. And And you can, of course, when you die, then what, right? You can't take it with you anyway. Laura says less is more here. And I think there is definitely a blessing of contentment. We're going to talk about that a little bit later, so we'll maybe hold off on that thought. But there is a blessing in rejoicing in less. And there's an old prayer too that says, Lord, don't give me too much or too little, just enough, or just enough for the day. And there's blessing in that. Any other comments or questions here on this section or on this question? All right, as the chapter closes out, good verses here, 18 to 20. According to Solomon here, what is the gift of God? And Laura, maybe this is the perfect transition. What is the gift of God here according to Solomon? How would you describe or summarize what he's saying here? The gift of God, verses 18 through 20. Yeah, you're right, Joanne. Good old grandpa he always used to say that you'll never see a U-Haul behind a hearse. That has stuck with me since I was probably 8 when I heard it the first time. Can't take it with you. So there's satisfaction in our work, Rachel says. Be occupied, have gladness of heart. Pam says to enjoy your life. Tom says be happy, find satisfaction. And the word I'm looking for, and you're all saying it, the word I'm looking for, Jenny just posted, contentment. I think Solomon here, he's describing contentment, right? It's accepting our lot in life and finding joy in our work. How do you find it, though? How do you find contentment? How do you find this ability, as you guys are saying here, to enjoy life, to be happy with life? And Marge says to enjoy all that he has given. How do you find that contentment? How do you find it? Okay, Amy says it's a gift from God, and you need to be connected to him daily. Through Jesus, you're right, as Laura says. So, yeah, the more we know our God, the more connected we are to him, the more we grow in our faith and our appreciation and our love for him, and contentment's going to flow from that. What's going to fight that, though? Okay, yeah, you're right, Pam. Some of it has to do with living our faith too, right? It's contentment comes out in the way that we live, for sure. People are going to see it in the fruit that we produce. Amy says, being in the scriptures, absolutely, Rachel. That you're right. That is the verse I was thinking about before. Yeah, so and really what that's talking about, it's trust, right? Knowing that God's going to take care of me day in and day out, and I don't have to worry about it. And that's hard, right? What are some things that fight against this contentment? Just think about your life, wherever you are, wherever God has placed you. What's the number one thing in your life that fights against contentment? Let's just see how many different reasons we can come up with here. In your life, what is the number one enemy of contentment? Levon, I think that's a good comment too. And maybe this particular Christmas maybe helped us realize that a little bit. In Joel, yeah, hey, pray for it. If you're struggling with contentment, guess who wants to help you find it? So pray for it. All right, so some things that are fighting contentment in our lives. We see worry mentioned twice, fear, comparison. So the keeping up with the Joneses game, right? Tom, the world tells us you need more and more. U.S. Cellular texts me every time a new phone is coming out, right? And the idea is, hey, get it while you can. I usually don't respond to those, but yeah, right. The world around us continually bombards us with, you need new and better. Anything else out there in your life that fights against contentment? A lot of worry. So Jenny, and that's maybe less to do with money and more to do with who we are and how we are serving. I think if I'm understanding that correctly. Rachel talks about the happiness of others. Judy talks about coveting. Yeah, good one. Pam talks about not being focused on the word. Certainly that's going to make contentment hard. Jane talks about tough things that can happen, right? Losses of job and health, expectations, as Joel mentioned. So there's a lot, right? There's a lot here that is fighting against the contentment in your heart. All the more reason to pray and to stay connected. I think for me personally, the thing that can fight against contentment is the great what if, right? The unknown. Well, what if this were to happen or that were to happen? You can what if yourself into an awful lot of worry and doubt. And a lot of times it'll never happen, right? But we kind of fret about the things that even aren't happening. And that can make it hard to be content as well. Good stuff. Well, what a blessing. If you can find contentment, what a blessing that is. And that only feeds your ability to serve your Lord. Good. All right. Anything else? Chapter 5. I think we covered that pretty well. Probably ought to get on here to chapter 6. All right. So chapter 6 changes gears just maybe slightly. Question 1 says, on what basis can the teacher say that a stillborn child is better off than a prosperous person who cannot enjoy his or her blessings? It seems like a morbid thought, but on what basis can he say that? You and I would probably not make that comparison if we hadn't read it here. But what is Solomon getting at with this one? All right, so Ron and Joan say, so not having to live in this sinful world is better than living in it without a godly contentment. I think that's said. I think that's well said. Tom says that the child isn't aware of what he's missing. He doesn't know. He hasn't had that experience. He's resting in peace, right? He's resting in peace while the other guy continues to suffer and go through the misery and the striving and all the chasing of wealth. And I think Rachel sums it up well too there. Finally, without God, you're not going to enjoy any of your blessings anyway. And Solomon's point throughout this, right? Life without God, it's meaningless. There's no lasting value, right? There might be value in the moment, but nothing that's going to be lasting. All right, then he gets to verse 11 and 12, and this connects with what we were talking about in chapter 5 with the listening and before we speak. Before we do that, Jane's got a question on verse 2. So verse 2, God gives a man wealth, possessions, and honor, so he lacks nothing his heart desires. But God does not enable him to enjoy them, and a stranger enjoys them instead. So a lot of things could happen there, Jane. Maybe he would die unexpectedly. Maybe something happens that causes him to lose his wealth. Maybe a circumstance in life comes along and there's problems. Solomon's just saying here, just because you have it, there's no guarantee that you're going to get to enjoy it. Life can be full of problems when it comes to wealth. Jenny's got a great example there. I don't know if I read both of those quotes, but talks about what a blessing for the baby. Yeah, there's a passage in Isaiah that connects here, and it talks about how, in this world we think it's terrible for someone to die young, but Isaiah, and I don't have the chapter or verse, but Isaiah talks about we don't consider that the young are blessed to go to heaven early. The young are blessed to get out of this and just to go be with Jesus sooner. Why is this a grievous evil, Jane? It's just Solomon would say it's unfair. It's unfair, and it just adds to the meaninglessness of the whole thing. So thanks for that example there, Jenny, too. And I think, the Bible gives us perspective there that we wouldn't have had otherwise, right? What a blessing for that baby. And a comfort and assurance for the parents, too. So 11 and 12, Solomon talks more about talk. How does verse 12 help us to control our thoughts and our words? Ron and Joan there say that the more words you speak, the less they mean. I circled that one. That struck me. What's the advice then? So what's the application? When Solomon says the more the words, the less the meaning, how does that profit anyone? How do you apply that to your life then? I think that means I need to talk less, but in this setting, maybe I can't, right? But I think, again, be quick to listen. Don't be quick to tell what you know, because it's probably maybe not as impressive as we think it is, right? Solomon just says, say what you mean, and let's not go overboard. Anything else here? And I think especially in comparison to life, do we really know what's best for us? Do we really know how things should turn out? Again, with the previous chapter, let God be God, right? Let's not, you and I, there's so much we don't know. So Tom's got a question in verse 12. For who knows what is good for a man in life during the few and meaningless days he passes through a shadow? Who can tell him what will happen under the sun after he is gone? Yeah, so maybe you're not asking a question. Maybe Tom's just making the point there. Are you asking a question, Tom, or just making an observation? Help me out there. Any other thoughts to question 2 here, verses 11 and 12? Any other thoughts? All right, so chapter 7. Chapter 7 is going to talk about wisdom. So Tom says he was just making an observation there. Yeah, it finally, and I think this is where you're going. Connection. If you're thinking about wealth again, what do you really? What's your legacy, right? What are you really leaving behind? And there's more to life than wisdom. Ron and Joan, so that's a good observation. I can't tell you the last time I don't know if I've ever tried to prepare a 45-minute one. But I think there's some truth to that. And it's a lot easier to just run on and on and on. It's I think can be more difficult to be concise or precise, and to say fewer words, but to have them mean something. Yeah, I think there's a point to that for sure. All right, chapter 7 talks about wisdom. The first 6 verses here play on a theme. It says, sorrow is better than laughter. And if you look at each verse from that standpoint, can you tell us, why is sorrow better than laughter as you look at those 6 verses? Give us a reason here why sorrow is better than laughter. Interesting quote there, Rachel. I am not familiar with that one from Twain, but that's interesting. My only comparison would be, when we ask churches, I used to be on a committee that would help churches plan for outreach, and asking them to come up with a mission statement. They could quickly come up with one that was just run-on sentence for, a couple hundred words. Asking them to boil that down to 20 words was much more of a challenge. Yeah, Joel, another good example there, Joel. All right, so Tom struggles here with these verses 1 through 6. So Laura says one thing here, maybe sorrow brings us closer to Jesus, for sure. We'd probably rather he did it a different way, right? But sorrow brings us closer, right? When I can think of, I had I think it was about a 14-month period where I lost three grandparents a couple years ago, and yeah, that sure brings you closer to your Savior and His Word, for sure. Rachel says here, talks to humility and understanding that this life is nothing compared to the next. Yeah, I think so. Hopefully it teaches us to value what's next. Amy talks about growing our faith and our maturity. I think so. And maybe too, it helps us just understand, and I think maybe this is what Rachel's saying too, is that this world isn't all it's cracked up to be. But maybe, yeah, so Judy agrees there with a couple of the comments. Hard times are where we learn. We meditate, we reflect. There is blessing there. And finally, too, if life is short, if life is hard, if life is full of sorrow, doesn't it kind of make you ask the question, how are you going to use your time? When you get to the end, of life, and you look back and you say, how did I use my time? I think Solomon would say a lot of it isn't going to matter, right? And so can we use our time in a way that can be worthwhile and a blessing? Tom says sorrow is the beginning of wisdom. Yeah, I think in a way, as some of the others here are commenting, it helps us look for Jesus. It helps us understand this world is full of sin. It's imperfect. It's never going to be what we want it to be. So I think it makes us humbly accept the way things are in this world. And perhaps it keeps us then from overreacting or falling to despair, right? Because we have a realistic outlook on life. So I think in those ways, I would say yes, Tom, that sorrow can be the beginning of wisdom. Pastor likes verse 4. It comes without meaning, departs in darkness, and in darkness its name is shrouded. Nope, I'm in the wrong chapter there. Sorry. Verse 4, the heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of pleasure. Yeah, chasing after pleasure in this world can look awful fun, but it doesn't end well. God says that's how a fool approaches things. So yeah, and I think in our society that's a a good reminder. All right, anything else there on those first 6 verses? The question here says, why is a funeral dinner better than a victory celebration? Would you say that? Why is a funeral dinner better than a victory celebration? So why is a funeral, let's assume a Christian funeral. Why is a Christian funeral better than if the Packers win the Super Bowl? Would you agree with that, right? But why? Why? A good thought there, Rachel, too. So that just in connection with the wisdom there. Anne says it gives you time to reflect. Should have, could have. There's always going to be that as sinners looking back. But hopefully, we read stuff like this from Solomon. Maybe it motivates us too, right? To maybe live in a way that takes advantage of the time. So Jenny says it's an eternal celebration, life in heaven, freedom from the sinful world, and eternity with Jesus. Yeah, it's eternal. That's the key word there. Any victory celebration in this world is fleeting. Guess what? If the Packers win, somebody else is going to win it next year, right? But that funeral victory that a Christian has, that's eternal. And nothing in this world is. And Pam says it's the end of conflict too. Yeah. And we've got eternity in heaven to look forward to. And good thoughts coming through here. Yep. There's nothing like it. Nothing like a Christian funeral. I would say to a confessional Lutheran funeral. There's just so much joy and hope there. All right. Number 2, have you ever yearned for the good old days? Read verse 12 and evaluate that thought. Maybe you've, in this year in particular, or this past year, you've said or heard said, boy, it's not like the good old days. Have you yearned for the good old days? And what do you think about that in light of verse 10? He says there, do not say, why were the old days better than these? He says it's not wise to ask such questions. What's Solomon saying there? Aha. All right. So Rachel has a good thought there. Garrison Keeler said in a Pray Home and Companion episode that wishing for simpler times of our youth was a disservice to the struggles the older generation went through and shielded us from. Yeah, I think it's a great insight. They probably weren't as great as we remember, right? And Jenny, I like your comment there too. Man, I can't wait for that, to get rid of, to see folks without their masks on. But we do remember the past, and Ron and Joan say it there. We remember the good things. We forget how hard it was. And I'm sure there is some medical explanation to why we remember it that way, why we remember just the good things. But there's always been struggle. There always will be struggle. And Melissa, I think good point there that it coincides with that earlier comment too. We didn't know or weren't aware of everything that was happening. And finally, Solomon, he wants us to focus on today, right? I think God would say now is the day of salvation, right? Now is the time. Don't worry about tomorrow. Paul says he forgets what is behind and he strains toward what is ahead. Amy is right. There's nothing new. It's all what happened today happened then too. Oh, Judy, good comment there. Yeah, I think, our first reaction was maybe to feel like let down after this Christmas. But we still had all we needed, right? Still had Jesus. Joel, I like that comment as well. If we idolize the past, that It makes it awful hard to be content in the present. And Tom, I like that too. Look forward with Jesus. So good stuff there. And it doesn't mean you can't fondly remember your childhood. Man, I got so many good memories. And those are blessings. All the memories you have, those are blessings from God. But boy, don't neglect the present for wanting the past. All right, so then we jump ahead. Verse 14 is a tremendous leveler of emotions. When times are good, be happy. When times are bad, consider. God has made the one as well as the other, and he loves us in both, by the way. He loves us in both the good and the bad. In this verse, to me, it should keep us on an even keel, right? Not too high, not too low. No matter what's going on, God's love for me, right? Romans 8, it's there constantly. Great. I really appreciated that verse. It just, it's going to happen, right? Good and bad. It's going to ebb and flow throughout our lives. God loves us in both. All right, verse 15. What aspect of meaningless does Solomon speak about here? Verse 15, what aspect of meaningless? How would you summarize that? He says, a righteous man perishing in his righteousness. He's seen that. He's seen a wicked man live long in his wickedness. When you go to the movies, you want to see the good guys win, right? You want to see good triumph over evil. But Solomon is saying it doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes the bad guys win. Sometimes the good guys die early. Sometimes they don't win. They don't triumph. It doesn't always happen, and that's just life in this sinful world. And like Solomon says too, you could drive yourself crazy trying to figure that out. All right, then we get to verses 21 and 22. He says, don't pay attention to every word people say, or you may hear your servant cursing you. For you know in your heart that many times you yourself have cursed others. Apply that to your life as a father, a mother, a teacher, a boss, a policeman, so on. Well, how do those two verses apply to your life? It maybe took a second to figure that out. What's Solomon getting at there? Don't pay attention to every word people say. People say a lot of things, right? Rachel says, show grace. And finally, let's not overreact to every little comment we maybe hear about us. Let it go, right? Rachel says, show some grace. Melissa says, people are going to say things about us, and we've said it about other people, right? That is what it is, and let's not overreact. Tom says, be careful here with this, because we do it too, don't we? Humbly acknowledge, hey, we've said things, and finally too, maybe somebody says something in the moment, they didn't mean it. It just, don't overreact to it, right? You could drive yourself crazy. Again, show some grace, as Rachel says there. Anything else on chapter 7? Anything else on chapter 7? Verse 20. So I think one knock on Ecclesiastes over the years has been, where's Jesus? And true, I think that Ecclesiastes has a different purpose. But if you look at verse 20, he says, there's not a righteous man on earth who does what is right and never sins. Doesn't that point out the need for Jesus? Right? I think verse 20, we're all in the same boat. and we all need somebody, right? We all need Jesus. And to me, that's a spot in Ecclesiastes where I would say it at least makes me think about my Savior. So Tom, I like your comment too. Yeah, I've got a lot of underlines and highlights and scribbles and circles on mine here too. And by the way, I hope you're doing that at home. Mark that Bible up. That's a good thing. Mark that Bible up. Ron and Joan say, please explain verse 28. Now let me take a look here. So I'm going to start in 27. The teacher says, this is what I've discovered. Adding one thing to another to discover the scheme of things, while I was still searching but not finding, I found one upright man among 1,000, but not one upright woman among them all. This only have I found: God made mankind upright, but men have gone in search of many schemes. So that's a really good question, and I don't know that I gave it a lot of thought on my previous read through, but I think his point here is not to compare men and women, but often they would kind of restate the previous. And I think his point here is it's just really hard to find anybody who's upright. If you look at verse 29, God made us that way, but men have gone in search of many schemes. So I think just in the context, I think his point is you're just not going to find anybody who's upright. It's really hard to do because we've all tended to go our own way. So I don't think he's not comparing man or woman there. If there's only one upright man, I don't think that's a lot better, right, Ron and Joan? I think that's nothing to brag about either, right? So I don't think his point here is that women aren't upright. Clearly, men aren't either, right? And again, I'd have to go back and look, but very often in the Hebrew poetry, they'll state something and then they'll go back and try to restate it almost in a more intensive way to make the point. So he's not running down women here. As I look at this, he's just saying, I found only one upright man, and to kind of restate the case, and I didn't find any upright women. Neither men or women have a right to brag there, right? His point is just nobody's upright, right? And Romans would say that too. There's no one righteous. There's not even one. I'll be happy to look at that closer, but that would be my take on it right now. And please feel free to disagree. Pastor Kirshner, I know you're out there. If you disagree, let us know. Anybody else has a different take, let us know. But that's my thought on it at the moment. Yeah, Rachel, I think that's a comparison, right? She says there's one in a million. There's no way you'd make that. I think that's the point. And no need to apologize, Joan. I think here's a case where the Hebrew struggles in the English. It's very common in Hebrew poetry to make a statement and then to follow it up with an even more intense statement. And to me, that's what this is. But yeah, I mean, I get why you're asking that question. And I don't know that I don't know if I'd go. So Amy says that she found something. Yeah, I don't know if that I'm going to buy that one. Because Solomon hasn't really talked himself up through all of this. It just to me, doesn't fit the context, the way he's described himself. Tell you what, I'll take a look at it, and we can revisit that next week. Okay, that was John there that found that. Yeah, I just, to me, that doesn't quite fit the context here. This is good though. I mean, this is It's good to wrestle with this. I'm going to take a look, see if I can figure anything else out. We'll come back to that. All right, let's see. So let's maybe forge ahead. And please remind me next week if I forget to come back to that. Let's go to chapter, let's see here. Where are we? Chapter 8. Let's see if we can close out with chapter 8 there. Yeah, no problem, Joel. I'll check mine out. And Tom, we'll see. I think, well, let's cap it there, and we'll bring that one back next week. That's why I like this. It makes me think, and there's stuff I haven't thought through yet. So very good. All right, chapter 8. So Solomon's going to talk about obeying the king. Perhaps some application to us today. The first question, though, focuses on verses 12 to 14. And there seems to be a contradiction here in verses 12 to 14. What is that contradiction, and how is it solved? And I think if you look at verse 14 especially, what seems to be the contrast here? Or the contradiction? Anybody seeing it? Verse 12, the wicked man commits 100 crimes and still lives a long time. I know that it will go better with God-fearing men who are reverent before God. Yet because the wicked do not fear God, it will not go well with them, and their days will not lengthen like a shadow. Something else meaningless, though, righteous men who get what the wicked deserve, and wicked men who get what the righteous deserve. So he's saying it appears that it's backwards, right? Sometimes the righteous man gets what the wicked deserves, and sometimes the wicked man gets what the righteous deserves. How is that solved? How do we solve that contradiction? And Tom says here, the righteous man will receive his reward. Right? Certainly at the final judgment, this will be sorted out. On earth, sometimes it goes backwards, right? Sometimes the justice doesn't play out the way that we would think. But certainly in eternity, in heaven and the final judgment, that gets sorted out, right? And the righteous will have the reward. A lot of comments here. Okay, yeah, I think so. You're all kind of restating or saying the similar things here. And Joyce maybe summed it up well, earthly rewards versus heavenly rewards. And the problem is we see the earthly, we don't see the eternal, right? And it can distract us. There's a couple of Psalms where the author gets really distracted by the wicked prospering, right? And that can be hard for us to see. But we need to keep in mind the heavenly rewards. We need to know how this ends for the believer. Jenny references there the parable of the rich man and poor Lazarus. And Laura, you're right. When we look around the world and we see right is wrong and wrong is right, man, that's frustrating, isn't it? But the Christian is always focusing on what's yet to come. That's why the world doesn't get us, but it can also be pretty frustrating to do. It does kind of stand out, doesn't it, Joel, when it goes back, when it is backwards like that. And Pam reminds us here too that God sees the big picture. He has it all figured out. Good. Then if we jump to 15 through 17, the end of the chapter, What points here does Solomon kind of repeat for us? He says them in a different way. What points does he repeat there? And I think there's two important takeaways. Two important takeaways that he restates for us in these verses. Verse 15 gives you one, for sure. And then I think verse 17 gives you the other. Yeah, Rachel's got it there. For one, just enjoy life. Solomon says he commends the enjoyment of life. Yeah, Scott, be content, right? Find joy in your work. Tom says, be content in all circumstances. Find joy in what you have, in where you've placed. And then verse 17, you're never going to be able to figure it out, right? You're never going to be able to figure out life and why this or that, right? And I like the last sentence there. Even if a wise man claims he knows, he can't really comprehend it. At a previous read through, in my margin, I wrote, "We don't have all the answers, even as pastors," and we just kind of saw evidence of that, didn't we? We don't have it all figured out. You're never going to have it all figured out, and that has to be okay. That has to be okay. We have to trust our God, as Ron and Joan just posted there. Only God sees the big picture. So let him do that. Let him do that. And we can just be content. Jane, you're not surprised by that, right? I trust that's a little bit of sarcasm there. Definitely do not have all the answers. If that hasn't been proven by now, I don't know what to tell you. But I'm happy to learn along the way here. Happy to learn with all of you. Any other any takeaways, comments, questions on this section of Ecclesiastes? Excited to finish it out with you guys next week, and we will revisit that question that Joan asked there. Any other thoughts, verses you want to remember? Anything you learned here that you want to just comment on before we close it up for tonight? So Judy says her 10-year-old granddaughter just asked her the meaning of life and was disappointed. I said I was still learning. Yeah, that's fun. Yeah, I mean, but hopefully she got the point there, right? If we ever stop learning, then we're in trouble. I think I like that thought there, Pastor. We will know fully when we get to heaven, and we'll probably do one of these. Oh, right now I get it. Now I see it. That's interesting, Pam. So Pam said a main theme I found when I was taking care of the elderly in the nursing home was that they wish they had enjoyed life more. That resonates with me. A couple years ago on a vacation, I bumped into a guy from Ireland, and we just got talking. And he couldn't understand our culture as Americans, because as he viewed it, it was all living for a future reward. We work so hard in the hopes that someday we'll retire and enjoy life. And he said that to him that was so stupid. And he talked about how his country was much more enjoy the moment, enjoy the day. Yeah, you can work hard, but maybe don't go overboard. So that strikes me, Pam. Thanks for sharing that. I just I think Solomon is encouraging all of us to find some joy in the day. Find some joy in the day. So Joanne talks about contentment. Love what you do. Know that it makes a difference. Yeah, God's got stuff for all of us to do, right? And it's fulfilling as we serve him. Oh, hey, hi, Heidi and Steve. And Steve, I like that comment too here. yeah, God doesn't just see it, right? He designed the picture. So thank you for that. Not just seeing it, but he put it there. Yeah, thank you. So Joel talks about enjoying life. Scott asks, was I at a night? No, of all places, I was in Orlando at Disney, and we were just sitting around waiting for the fireworks, and just struck up a conversation with him, and pretty insightful. That always stuck with me. Had a chance to do a little bit of sharing the gospel, and it was kind of fun. But yeah, neat conversation for sure. So Laura talks about living in the moment. So important. Tomorrow's never promised. Yeah, none of us are guaranteed tomorrow. Right now is the day of salvation. Right now is the time. Work while it is day. Good stuff, everybody. Anything else? I'll hang out for a couple minutes yet. Yeah, so Rachel says, reading through this is a somber reminder that someone much wiser than me is weary with the world. Yeah, boy, if Solomon came to this conclusion, yeah, I mean, we're not gonna outsmart him, right? Man, we need Jesus, don't we? Tom, that's funny too. We had saved and we were careful, but you can't help but spend a little money when you're down there for sure. All right. Anything else? Anything else tonight? This has been good. Always good to chat, and looking forward to next Tuesday. So again, next Tuesday we'll finish Ecclesiastes, which means the following week we'll jump back to a New Testament book. And I think, if you guys don't object, we're just going to go kind of back and forth. One from the old, one from the new, one from the old, one from the new, and just keep going back and forth. All right. Blessings to all of you. Have a great night. And we will see you soon. This Sunday, we start a new sermon series. So maybe check that out. Hey, Melissa, you're right. I think that is true. I think we broke last week's record here. So awesome. Keep it up. Keep joining us. And blessings to you all. Sounds good, Rachel. We're looking forward to it as well. Yeah, Levon, that's well said. Well said. All right, guys. God bless. I gotta head down to a meeting. God's blessings. We'll see you next week.